This lecture is for chapter 5 of the Odyssey. So if we recall when we left chapter 4, Odysseus is now traveling to the land of the dead to speak with the blind prophet Tiresias and to learn what he must do to return home. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and hop right into it. So on page 1, we have Odysseus continuing this story in a flashback to the king and his court at the Phoenician island. So much of what follows below are going to be geographical descriptions of their journey to the house of the dead. They enter the river Oceanus in the land of the Chimeres, covered in mist, so they think that the sun rays never reach the land. When they reach the land, they disembark with a pair of sheep given to them by Circe to be used as sacrifices. The men leave the ship fully armored, expecting an imminent attack. Odysseus informs his men that they must follow the river Oceanus. So, one of the things that we want to look at in the underworld is just what the setting looks like, right? There's kind of this dark, dreaded, cold atmosphere that's being drawn in. So they find the entrance to the land of Hades, the underworld, and Odysseus follows some very precise directions that Circe has given him, digs a trench and fills it with honey, milk, wine, water, wheat barley, and then tops it off with a sacrificed sheep, draining their blood into the trench. And then they wait. They see different types of dead. The brides, the bachelors, the young, the old, the brave men. Their shrill, lifeless cries were enough to make him turn pale with fear. At this point, Odysseus orders his men to flay the carcass of the sacrificed sheep as a burnt offering to the spirits and continue repeated prayers to Hades and Persephone. Again, they have no idea what to expect here, right? No two experiences in the underworld are alike. We see some more literary devices here at the bottom panel. You guys might keep an eye out for those. Odysseus holds the dead back because he's waiting for Tiresias to have his blood first. And while Odysseus and his men are waiting, they see Elpenor, the young man who fell off the roof at Circe's palace the morning they left. Elpenor begs them to bury him with his oar over his grave, or else he will cause trouble for them. Odysseus agrees and then has a startling revelation. His mother is one of the spirits. Now, when Odysseus left for Troy, his mother was still alive, but at some point in the 11 or 12 years he's been gone, she has died. Brutal. First time you've seen your mom in over a decade, and she's dead. Odysseus begins to question his mother, but realizes she doesn't even recognize him, since most of the dead wander without their memories. Odysseus will not let her come near the blood, even though he wants nothing more than to talk with his mother. Tiresias has to go first, and eventually he arrives. He asks Odysseus why he's journeyed to the underworld, perhaps a bad sign considering that he is supposed to see the future. He drinks from the trench of blood and then reveals what he knows that Odysseus needs to know about his journey home. Tiresias informs Odysseus that he will not be able to avoid the wrath of Poseidon. Poseidon is still furious with Odysseus for the blinding of his son, and he gives Odysseus a warning about cattle that graze on the island of Apollo that belong to him. If any are harmed, Odysseus' ship and his men will be destroyed. And then he also warns Odysseus about the state of his household, and finally tells Odysseus how he will appease Poseidon. So we get a lot of information. That this bottom panel is actually a flash forward as the prophet Tertius is telling him what's going to happen in the future, right? So a lot of this story, because it's told at the Phoenician Islands, is in a flashback. Here we're actually seeing a flash forward, a hint of what is to come. Now, before Tertius leaves, he tells Odysseus that the other spirits will be able to have conversations with him if he lets them drink the blood in the trench. So Odysseus first offers the blood to his mother, who's very curious why he came to the land of the dead if he's still alive. So she gives him a little update, how his wife and son are doing, but that there are bad things going on at home. He learns that his father spends all of his time at his own home, grieving over Odysseus and wondering why he is still not returned. We learn that Odysseus' mother actually died of heartbreak, constantly worrying about her son while he was away fighting at Troy. Odysseus tries to give his mother a hug, but his arms go right through her. He permits other spirits he knew in life to drink from the trench and to talk with him until finally all that is left is Agamemnon, the king who organized Troy. Odysseus offers Agamemnon blood from the trench in exchange for information about how he died. He wonders why the leader of all the Achaeans met on his way home from Troy that killed him. It's like, dude, what happened? Last time I saw you, you were fine. Did your ship sink? Or did you die in some battle on the way home? And Agamemnon reveals what we actually already know from chapter 1, that he was caught in a net by his wife and her lover and stabbed to death. Oof. That sucks. Now, this might be important for Odysseus, right? If when Agamemnon got home, he was killed by his wife and her lover, is it possible for him, when he gets home, for maybe his wife and her lover to kill him? Again, we know that she doesn't have a lover, but Odysseus doesn't. So this should start to impact our hero as he starts thinking about getting home. So we continue seeing conversation with Achilles. And last but not least, we meet Ajax. Ajax committed suicide after losing Achilles' armor to Odysseus. And his appearance, so Ajax was what was called a character foil. He's kind of like the opposite, where Odysseus is known for strategy. Ajax is known for throwing large rocks at the Trojans to save the Achaean ships. So where Odysseus is the brain, Ajax is the brawn. Unfortunately, the two men are not able to reconnect, and there's a little bit of a jump in time where they go back to their ship. They return to Circe's island. They set up a grand funeral for Elpenor so that he doesn't come and haunt them. And Circe meets with Odysseus once more and gives him advice about 4 things: the sirens, the Scylla, the Charybdis, and the cattle of the sun god. And then she sends them with a fair wind home. So I think it's fascinating when we look at Circe, right? It does appear that she genuinely loves him. If I'll have a little spoiler here, but after Odysseus' death, she actually invites Penelope and Telemachus to live on her island, where she makes them both immortal. So she, out of all of the characters that we've met so far, she seems like a pretty genuine, caring gal for Odysseus. Now, we continue. Odysseus finally gets some nice weather. Poseidon's fury seems temporarily abated, but they come across a new danger, the Sirens. The Sirens were a creature whose beautiful singing would draw men in, and then they would destroy them. But Odysseus has a plan. He's going to put wax in his men's ears so they cannot hear the Sirens' songs. However, Odysseus wants to hear the songs, but he doesn't want to die. So he has his men tie him to the top of the mast. So and as they begin to get close to the Sirens' lair, he hears their songs floating across the water. Odysseus, why does he want to listen to these songs? Is it maybe for possibility of knowledge that no living man possesses? Is he continuing to kind of have this prideful streak? No one has listened to the Sirens and lived. So Odysseus is now the first man to come up with a way to listen to the Sirens and live. And now we meet the Sirens. Now, the Sirens were kind of, again, another kind of femme fatale faced by Odysseus on his journey home. They promise him that all is going to happen in the world. And Odysseus, as he is able to listen, starts to fight the bonds of his men that they've tied on him, yells at them to unbind him, but the men, as they cannot hear the Sirens, they cannot hear him, they row past the Sirens. So we continue. Having passed the Sirens, Odysseus is released, and they hear the rushing of the whirlpool Charybdis roaring in the distance. The men ask Odysseus what this sound is, but he just tells them to trust in Zeus and row as hard as they can. He orders them to steer the ship closer to the rocks on the wall on the other side of this strait, or they are going to die. He does not, however, tell his men about Scylla, the many-mouthed and armed monster that lives on the rocks, because his fear his men would panic, cease to row, and that they would all die. So, again, there's a little bit of dramatic irony here where we and Odysseus know that he must choose one of these monsters to be closer to, either Scylla or the Charybdis. The men don't. So again, that's another sample of situational irony. And we meet the Scylla and the Charybdis. They're two monsters that presented every leader a difficult choice as they came by this strait. Scylla was actually a beautiful woman that had been transformed by Circe into a monster when she came between Circe and one of Circe's crushes. She had many heads and arms with mouths. Now, Charybdis, on the other hand, was a monster that would basically just suck water in to find food, creating this giant whirlpool. So think of Charybdis like the bathroom drain in your bathtub. Now, here's the thing. Scylla, having 6 heads and 6 arms, can only eat 6 people at a time. Charybdis, on the other hand, could suck in and destroy the entire ship. So Odysseus encourages his men to row with all of their might to safety. So as they get closer, they're rowing, and there's, again, tearing Odysseus up. But he knows if he gets too close to Charybdis, they are all doomed. And sadly, as they get closer and closer, Scylla attacks their ship, taking 6 of Odysseus's men. And Odysseus knows there's nothing he can do to help them, and he puts all of his focus and energy on saving the rest of his ship. He urges his men to row faster before Scylla eats those 6 and reaches for another 6. So I think this is a great example of being caught between a rock and a hard place. Again, there's no good choice here, right? There's no good choice. So we do see, though, that as Odysseus's men are being devoured, and as Odysseus is helpless, that Odysseus actually calls this the worst sight he has seen while sailing home. The most horrific sight, not Cyclops, not the underworld. This is the worst. This is a true tragedy. And Odysseus and his men survive their encounter with Scylla and Charybdis, except the 6 who, got eaten. So he reflects kind of on the advice he received and the decision he was forced to make, and he does decide it was better to lose 6 men than the entire crew, even though it was difficult to keep this information from his men. So that chapter ends with Odysseus and his men continuing home on their journey to Ithaca. Thus ends chapter 5.